What is up, all you GBA type people? This is Tom bringing you guys the Week 8 Power Rankings. And unlike other weeks, I am alone, so the dynamic might be a little bit different and a little more straightforward rather than, kind of a back and forth, a dialogue. Let me know how you guys feel about that. I'm sure I can, as you guys already know, Dan's no longer be with us, and any sort of bickering or discussion in the comments will not be tolerated. Me, as well as whoever runs the GBA account, will go through the comments, and we're going to try and avoid that because this is a power rankings video and not some sort of speculation video. That's pretty much the bottom line of it. So keep it that way, and if you have anything to talk about the power rankings, then go for it. I always like to respond. But let me know how you guys feel about this. Is going to me being single in these. I will look for replacements in the future, but this one I wanted to see how it sounded with me being just solo and how you guys respond to it. So, to start off, we're going to be discussing the bottom four teams which have now been eliminated, and those teams are the Detroit Steel Wings, the Pittsburgh Piratas, the Long Island Metro Rockies, and the Milwaukee Sawsbucks. Now, unlike previous weeks where Dan's and I have gone back and forth and had these like very broad discussions to kind of nitpick their things, I have very few things to talk about. So starting off with top of my number 12 spot, the hope I had for him leading in at the beginning of the season where he was very cheery and wanted to do well is kind of gone at this point. He's still making these very very early season misplays, such as not knowing he didn't have choice specs on his Salamence. It's at this point it's kind of a that those mistakes shouldn't be happening, and you should pretty much know your team since you are the one who built it. Not only that, the fact that he set up Belly Drum with his Azumarill, fully knowing that Hank still had Mega Pinsir left. Again, very bad plays, and basically what he's doing is he's letting his win conditions die early, and then he's playing almost just like padded the differential so he doesn't get hurt more. And it's not necessarily him playing badly. It's just he's not recognizing what is his win condition and what is expendable. Or he's just not getting a grasp as to his opponent's team and what he can exploit and what his team has to offer. I guess is the best way I can explain it. But one thing I will say that was good for him is that he had a good first turn prediction. He went for the Stone Edge expecting Tornades to come in against Hitmontop. That was a good play. Sucks that it missed. However, his idea thinking that Hank would want aggressive predictions over long-term momentum was kind of a bad idea on his end. Expecting the superpower so early from Tornadus, it was a good thing to be aware of, but it wasn't necessarily the best thing to kind of expect when Hank's objective was just to keep momentum for the entire match so that he remained in control. So that's pretty much it. Moving on to my number 11, which is Nips. Nips had a good team composition, and he still did make some very or bad plays. So bringing in Roserade against what he considered a resisted Earthquake. Well, Roserade doesn't resist Earthquake because it's part Poison type, but it was also an unnecessary switch. Having a special wall take physical hits from a Gliscor, who does have a pseudo-substantial attack stat, was not a good play. It wasn't smart, and it was very reckless. And then not only that, but then he also brought in Mega Altaria. He had it set up with the Cotton Guard, but then he had to switch it out because if he didn't, had gotten statused, and that would have negated or lessened his sweeping capability for later on. What he should have done is at least scouted the entire set that was from the Mons that was facing his Mega Altaria and his team before bringing it in, or at least kind of getting chip damage before setting up to ensure that he could live or that he could sweep. So overall, he had a good array of Mons, and he had some very good ideas as to how to handle Mavone's team. He had set Mons to handle multiple members of Mavone's team, not just one, as we've seen with some other coaches. Some of the other coaches have just been setting, these are all set to handle one Mon, like top handling or expecting Latios last week against Steve versus as compared to expecting a bunch of threats, not just one. So that's a good growth on his end. It's just a little too late, and he's kind of out of the playoff tourney. So at this point, he's just kind of playing for pride. So moving on to number 10, we have Crimson of the Detroit Steel Wings. He, again, this wasn't a bad match. It was kind of just an match on both players. I was able to watch his match last because he did upload his match as compared to everyone else the latest. So early on, I didn't quite understand the turn 1 Calm Mind. I think 2 T-Bolts would have been better than a Calm Mind and a T-Bolt. Knowing that his Gothitelle was Expert Belt, that damage would have been substantial. And just as a speculation type thing, maybe it would have prevented him from having to take the damage on his Skarmory from the Torrent Boosted Scald from the Empoleon. Now, that's just speculation. And maybe it would have made a difference. Allowed him to have a little bit more momentum and allowed John to roar out some of his mons like he had done. So not only that, but I think that he recognized this in his post-com, and I'll explain that in a minute. But he recognized that Swords Dance Aqua Jet was better than D-Dance Waterfall on his Feraligatr because at that point in the match, he had the coverage and the capability to sweep through John's team with the attack and the priority versus the speed that he needed, because unfortunately the speed tier that he was in at +1 was still below his Choice Scarf Crocodile, which allowed John to win versus allowing Crimson to pretty much kill John's playoff chances. So at least he recognized that, and the bottom line out of that is that's what I like about post-coms. It allows you to see your mistakes. It allows you to kind of reflect on them versus a live com, which kind of you just fall into this entertainment type category. And that might just be me. And I'm not asking to debate that point. It's just the way that I see it, because post-com you can kind of see, oh, I made this mistake. How do I fix it in the future? Versus I just have to entertain and keep a dialogue going for the entire match because that's what I'm doing. So he didn't play badly. That match was kind of just overall. But moving on, we have Steve. And Steve, he had some good ideas, but unfortunately they just didn't pan out like he had expected. The special defense of Ferrothorn, as he described, to help take on Goodra, that's not a sentence that kind of makes sense to me, because Goodra is so versatile and can carry so many coverage moves, especially a fire move, that it would probably one-shot Ferrothorn regardless. And because of that, he let Ferrothorn, just die. Ferrothorn does not take on Goodra, especially because Geo is a little bit too smart to not carry a fire move. And even if it was in the rain, it probably would have one-shot it anyway. I'm going to reference the Fire Blast in the rain against Scissor from a High Dragon. Kind of the same thing, even though Goodra is a little bit more balanced and less, specially invested. So, and then, not only that, but Steve then T-Waved Goodra, which was an move, I guess, but it wasn't the best move. I probably could have gotten damage off versus just T-Waving an already very slow Mon. It's not the fastest, but it's also not... It doesn't need to be T-Waved. So, but then finally, I guess the nail in Steve's hypothetical coffin that was this season was the fact that outside of his decent plan for his team, where it was balanced, however, it was kind of vulnerable on the special side if Ferrothorn and Suicune had died, because Geo could kind of exploit a fire weakness in a sense, was the crit EQ against his Suicune. That probably would have broken my will as well if I was in Steve's place, because yeah, it is kind of frustrating for Steve. He has put the effort in. He's planned decently well, but it just hasn't panned out. The guy only has two wins, and I'm sure it's difficult. So his frustration boiling over is probably the most entertaining part of that match, and did kind of show where he was at mentally during the match after that point. But at this point, like I said, all 4 of these teams are done with the playoffs, and their objective is to look towards next season, or look towards just kind of cheering on or whatever the teams in the postseason. So we're going to move on now to our 8 through 5 slots. So first up is Geo. And I kind of swapped Geo and John for a very specific reason, which I'll explain in a minute. But Gio played a very straightforward match. There's not much to talk about because, Gio just has been playing well enough to keep himself in the playoff race, but not necessarily well enough to really let him jump out in terms of differential. His differential is still negative, even though he's about 500 or just above 500, and that is kind of an issue because it pretty much gives Hank the upper hand in terms of getting into the playoffs against as compared to Gio. So that in itself is an issue, and Gio still has to play catch up, even though he isn't playing poorly. It's just his differentials holding him back. So it's gonna be interesting. I think this upcoming week, if Miguel wins and if Hank wins, then pretty much he's out based on differential. Not necessarily just by his win loss, but his differential. He just can't catch up. So that's unfortunate. But we're gonna move on to John, and I realize this is going very fast because I'm not talking back and forth with someone. I'm kind of just expressing my own thoughts. But this match might actually be what prevents John from um, getting in based on differential. Now, yes, he plays Cooper next week, and that match is going to be like the prime time show between the two because of the fact that they both have the same differential, 4-4. But the thing with this match is that John, it wasn't his best plan team building wise, but it wasn't the worst. His team building was effective, and it didn't show sometimes. His mons kind of either die early or they die in ways that he didn't expect. And for someone who had the best draft, it's hard to look past the fact that he isn't doing as well as one might expect. So, to get into some specifics, John saw red, and I've used this expression a few times this season, but he went for the kill against Skarmory rather than defogging to ensure that rocks weren't up all match. And because of that, he basically allowed Crimson to get damage off on a few things that maybe were a little crucial for John. Not only that, but the crit Stone Edge versus Venusaur or the unmega Venusaur with Rhyperior, and then from there also the Sylveon getting all the special attack drops and the paras, which led to its own, KO. John's luck is impeccably bad because of the fact that he couldn't really get a grasp on Crimson because of the fact that he was just being like beaten down with the game kind of screwing him. So because of that, the differential was almost skewed in Crimson's favor if he had, like I said, the Aquajet Swords Dance set versus the set that he was using, the D-Dance Waterfall set. If he had that set, he could have won. He could have beaten John, and that would have essentially killed his playoff chances. But because of the hacks, John did win a match that he needed to win, but only winning by 2-0. Yeah, it's hard for him to really be in that picture when he has put himself in the spot, and then he's winning with such low differential against a team where people might have expected him to win more. So, um, that's kind of something that's difficult to look past. So moving on from there, we have our final six, starting off with Cooper and the Utah Jasmine. Initially, that battle seemed very stacked up in Dan's favor. Even just initially, it seems like this was the stall match supreme, but obviously Dan kind of reversed his role and decided to go very offensive. So, a few things on Cooper's end. I think the double lead sheet as well as the knockoff with the Chansey coming in was very smart and was very effective because I know, like, if you can't one-shot a Chansey, one of the best things to do is to knock off its Violite or at least try to sap away its HP because, I mean, even Cooper said his Mon's got like 20% or better HP-wise back from the leech seed from the Chansey, which is actually really impressive, but not really that surprising. But something that was kind of surprising and something that I probably would have harped on endlessly if it had actually worked is the bright powder on Togekiss. You know what? It wasn't a bad idea because, as Cooper said, if you're going to bank on a Stone Edge miss, it's probably a good idea to, try and facilitate more misses and Bright Powder does just that. But on the same token, it seemed kind of like a desperate pull. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Yeah, it was funny, it was cute, it was kind of cool. But on the same token, it was also kind of grasping, kind of like almost desperate. But it was funny, and I guess that was pretty much all I could really like pick up out of that without thinking that it was kind of bizarre. But now, lastly, we have Shady. Now, the Shady, I have grouped all three of these, Sinnoh conference teams together because of the fact that they are so close in differential, and they're all kind of fighting for that conference win or for the wild card spot, mainly the wild card spot. But specifically, you have Shady kind of ahead of everyone, I think at +9. You have Cooper at +7, and you have John at +5. Now, Shady's only ahead by one game, but he arguably has the toughest schedule. And then you have Cooper and John still fighting for their divisional, first place spot, and then it comes down to that last wild card spot. Now this week, I believe whoever loses between John and Cooper, they're eliminated, they're done, and pretty much that wraps up the Sinnoh Conference. So from there, speaking of Shady, Shady played a very interesting match. Granted, he did play Miguel, who both of these competitors come out swinging and do a very good job in terms of predicting and preparing and just playing well. We've seen a lot out of Shady as he's grown, especially this season, and especially as a player, just being able to account for a lot of different aspects of the game rather just things that he expects to happen. So, it was a very good prediction on Shady to kind of not go right into Garchomp, especially because Miguel is such a good player, and he scouted for the Ice Punch before going right into Garchomp. Because think about it, if Shady had lost Garchomp right off the bat, the same way he lost Azelf right off the bat last week, Shady probably would have been reeling from that point, and it would have thrown off his entire plan. And it was also helpful because the Frieza melodic, was negated essentially by the Scald, and if that was on anything else, that probably would have been really detrimental to his overall game plan. But he, did very well in making sure Tentacruel went down with very little damage to Azelf and Chomp, just to make sure that the spinner was down and that he can get hazards up. However, I don't know exactly how well it benefited him in the long run because of the fact that I think Miguel was kind of able to pick apart both those sets and then kind of work his way from there. Like I said earlier, Shay's learning from his mistakes that he made prior games, and not only that, but then he addresses it in his commentary. He likes making the middle ground plays. He likes scouting for the information before he makes the risky moves, but he also does recognize that in order to get ahead like he needs to, in terms of differential and whatnot, he needs to make some risky plays and he needs to kind of get ahead a little bit. One of the risky plays that I'm a little unsure about that might have hurt him, in terms of his capability to win, was bringing in Honchkrow versus Victini, expecting the Zen Headbutt, where as Miguel could have very easily went for V-Create and it would have just roasted that bird. And that wouldn't have been good for Shady because I think Honchkrow at that point was really one of his only means of winning and really, making a dent in Miguel's team. Um, and Shea not going for the sucker punch at the end was probably where he really lost grasp of that match. And, like I said, it wasn't a bad play, and it wasn't a bad game from both of them. It was a really good match to watch on both ends. But unfortunately, one person had to lose and one person had to win. And Miguel is still on his constant winning streak. So moving up from there, we have Hank, and it's funny how Hank went from like the top to almost slipping down to number 6 or number 8, and now he's back up. At least in my mind, I think that he's been playing consistently, and I think that he has not only snapped back from that losing streak he had, but he's also playing effectively and not letting things kind of knock him down in terms of his own like game plan and mindset. Now, specifically, it was very interesting to see the very early prediction with having Sharpedo and where he went for Poison Jab, expecting Tup to go out into Azumarill. It wasn't aggressive, but it did in fact make sense because Azumarill outside of Poison Jab could pretty much take on a Sharpedo and not take that much damage at all. So the one thing I will kind of critique is the way he handled that +1 Ancient Power boosted Heatran. He, I feel like it was very roundabout, and him predicting the rocks, like they both had mentioned, was I could see why he did it, but on the same token, it was very roundabout, and it did cost him Amon and Tornadus. Granted, he didn't put the speed down, but I still think that the Excadrill would have outsped and killed. Maybe if he didn't have any speed investment, then yeah, okay, this makes sense. But it seemed risky and almost desperate in a sense. And I hope I don't see that type of play in the future because that's the type of stuff that could really hurt him against a lot of these playoff teams, such as because he's gonna be facing Malvone and Miguel in the playoffs realistically. So, and then finally, with Hank, the when he was explaining his breakdown, right? When he was going down piece by piece and explaining what he does in order to plan, he had said that he was utilizing one move on Infernape to handle 4 or 5 mons on Tup's team, that being Thunder Punch. And that to me is very, very smart because he's he's almost like centralizing a lot of issues that he had to face with Tup's team and putting it on one mon, and then he's handled that mon can handle multiple mons on Tup's team. That is how you plan. That is what some coaches need to learn still, and I know I mentioned this already this video, but it's something that needs to be definitely looked at. But also him not over predicting versus the Ments and just killing it. It was he capitalized on Tup's mistake, but also he just made sure that what he needed to get rid of was definitely what put him in a better position. And I guess just this kind of personal note, but every time I watch his narrations, he audibles every play and possibility that he and his opponent can make, and that not only like stimulates his thoughts, but it also makes sure that he doesn't get caught in like trip holes that his opponent could bring up and use against him, and essentially almost throw the momentum out of his favor and into his opponent's favor. So, and finally, we have our top three being Malvone, Dan, and Miguel. Now, leading off with Malvone, he played a very solid match this week, and he's played a very solid match, or very solid matches every week. He has been utilizing all his threats, not just Weavile, so well every single match. And it's funny, as an analyst, we have pinned him as having the most 4x weaknesses, but I'm also happily surprised that he's been proving us wrong, and he still maintains such control every single week. It was good playing by him whittling down all of Nips's his mons, their HP, with a little help of Nips's, before cleaning up with Weavile. And I've been saying it a lot recently, but he has so many speed options in order to take down his opponent that it's really hard to plan for everything he has with the mons that some teams are given. Now I'm sure someone like Dan or even Miguel could do a good job taking him down, but I think that's the excitement of the playoffs. We're going to see that match, and we're going to really see what these coaches are made of. And frankly, it's going to be exciting, and it's going to be just a thriller of a match to see how well these really good coaches with the really good teams are going to be able to take down their opponent. So moving on to someone who's a great team builder, Dan, number two. He's these past 2 weeks especially, he's been doing a great job at team building and planning, and he gets better and better every week. Ever since the beginning, where he was kind of winning by hacks or winning by some like very strange mean, he's been getting more ambitious, but in a good way, not in a reckless way. That's always important because in some teams, like last season for example, we would see some teams that would get really ambitious, but in a very like bizarre way, almost a way that seemed unnecessary, and put them in a worse position rather than in their mind thinking that they are being cheeky or they're being spontaneous or they're going to get in their opponent's head and they're not going to understand what they're doing. But speaking of which, we have Hidden Power Poison, Rotom Wash. That was awesome, actually. Assault Vest, you could take a hit from Whimsicott, and you can kill it right off the bat with a Hidden Power Poison. It was a great example of really great planning, and something that I don't think we've ever seen in the GBA. And I've kind of been here for a while, so also, the foul play with Mega Sableye pretty much ensured that Zard X could do nothing against that Sableye without dying, roosting or otherwise. It just kind of came in and then it took damage. And yeah, the crit knockoffs, he had 4 of them, and that's something I could harp on. Like, yeah, it sucked for Cooper. Yeah, it was kind of excessive that Dan had so many knockoff crits, but what are you gonna do? I'm kind of done harping on Dan's crits. If that continue, if he loses in the playoffs because of crits or lack thereof, so be it. I'll talk about it then. But for right now, whatever, he won. It's good team building, and I like it. He's been put in better positions because of that, but it's not just that. It's the lack. It's the fact that he outplans and outplays. And I'd honestly probably be bitching if Cooper had won based on that bright powder, because I know I'd probably be a little annoyed if I got bright powdered and I lost. So, and then finally we have the number one perennial for the past like 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but it's Miguel. And Miguel essentially, he played like he usually does. It was just Miguel being Miguel. And it's funny, the high jump kick crit against the melodic definitely allowed or allowed Miguel, sorry, to move forward and win the way that he did. But even without it, I think that Miguel would have just progressively whittled down Shady's team, and he always seemed to be in control, even when he lost Tentacle. Yeah, there was capability for Shady to come back and, in fact, win, but there was never really a moment that Miguel had lost control and had to play on off his heels. So that's always impressive. That's certainly something that we've seen week in, week out. But one of the other things too that I kind of stole from the recap is the fact that Miguel had Prankster T-Wave on Thunderous to counteract Shady's Sticky Web, which kind of kept Victini and Megalopony from really outspeeding and bopping most of his team. And it might have been inadvertent, it might have not been as planned out as Miguel might have thought, but it worked and it was effective and it kept him in control. And that's all that really matters. And we're going to be going into these last 2 weeks seeing, these teams just kind of wrap it up and get ready for the playoffs, because the way it's looking right now, it's looking like Miguel is going to be the first week bye guy for the whatever it is, the Hoenn Conference, and then Dan's going to be the first week bye guy for the Sinnoh Conference. And then the other two teams we still kind of have to figure out, but one of them looks to be Movone, and we'll see the others soon. So that's it. That'll wrap it up for the power rankings. Again, let me know what you guys think of me doing this solo. I kind of had to adjust because I felt like it wasn't as dialogue-y. It was just me kind of rattling off my list and my thoughts, which might have been in depth, but I don't know how you guys feel about it. Let me know. And again, don't bicker in the comments. Just talk as you would if there were two people here. And hell, next week I'm probably going to find someone to join me. I just didn't want to do it on such short notice when we're all kind of busy and whatnot. So hope you guys enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. And as always, I will talk to you guys in the comments, and I will see you all next week for week 9 power rankings. So as always, later.